Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Paul Campbell. Welcome to the Pulse of High Performance. This is episode 14, and I'm very pleased to be joined by my co-host, Will Bryce, and a special guest, Wayne Meyer. Wayne and I had an opportunity to meet a few years ago, actually during COVID. As a matter of fact, where he was looking for a solution to help him with his plants and metrics. We had kicked off a conversation, helping him look standardize what he was looking for. And it's been a great journey so far, and I look forward to that going forward. But Wayne, I'd love for you to share with the audience a little bit about your background and a little bit about Teijin Automotive.
Yeah, so I'm the Vice President of Operations for Teijin Automotive. The easiest way to reflect on what we do as a company is if you think of a Corvette, we make the body for the Corvette. So for GM, we make roof systems for Jeep Wranglers and things like that. So we make a lot of products that are very visible to automotive people that buy cars and trucks and vans and things like that. So that's what our company does. We're kind of a global company, but most of our operations in our sector of the business are here in North America. My history has been in automotive for 25 plus years. Anything from engine to transmission components to now outside body structures. And I've been involved with the idea of operational excellence and driving performance improvement all that time. I worked my way up from a shop floor position all the way to a role as vice president in two different companies. And I'm very happy with having partnerships with competitive solutions folks and things like that really help drive the improvement in a much quicker way.
That's great, Wayne. I know when we first started off, right, you were in a different role and kind of progressed into the role you're in. And I know your passion is where you are, right? Leading the plants and what you're doing. So great and wonderful. As you think about kind of manufacturing, you've been in this space for a long, long time. You've seen a lot of things happening within manufacturing, especially in the US, right? Changes that have gone on. What are some of the challenges that you're facing today in manufacturing?
Well, I think what's really interesting, especially over the last 3 to 5 years, is almost every year there's a new challenge. And it's really hard to predict. Go back to COVID. We kind of came through the COVID thing. And then last year it had a lot to do with the UAW strikes and different things with that. And now there's economic pressures. And so what we're seeing right now is a fluctuation in demand from our customers, which seems to be very unpredictable. So it's not in the automotive business. We've been very, and especially on the platforms that we're on, we're very used to very steady demand and but our customers are really trying to understand, I think, the marketplace better. I think their inventories on hand and the dealerships has driven them to take a look at what they're actually producing. So if I was going to talk about like the Jeep product, you think about the Jeep Wrangler, I think about somebody who wants to be an outdoors person, who wants to be out rugged. And I think there was a transition time where the Jeep folks really thought, well, let's make it a little bit higher end Wrangler. And all of a sudden it's hard to get the sturdy everyday model that you're going to run on the beach, on the dunes and things like that. So I think the market is changing. And you think about, also think about cars themselves. The traditional cars are leaving the market and going more towards SUVs and vans and trucks and things like that, which is really remarkable when you think about the drive for electric vehicles as well. I think that understanding the consumer's appetite right now is driving some of the automakers a little bit crazy. So we're seeing a high fluctuation in demand. And I think the larger challenge is really understanding what the electric vehicle market is going to be. Now, for us, we're agnostic to platforms, so we can go an electric vehicle or it doesn't matter. But a lot of people invest a lot of money to expected big sales in the electric vehicle market, which has in some cases turned out really well for like a Tesla. And we certainly have partnerships with them. But so far, I think there's some other challenges with other people trying to break into that market. So that's really where I think our challenges are right now, is understanding what the market's really going to be short term and long term.
Is it just automotive? I know you also work on marine, right? You do some in the marine side as well. Do you see any changes there on the marine side, or
Yeah,
with it?
the recreational vehicle side, truly, we've seen an impact because uh, the market went really hot during COVID because people wanted to get out and open door space, and there was a lot of investment in recreational type activity. And that market now has really almost halved itself. Basically, it's almost in half of where it was. And I think part of it is because if you buy an outboard engine, so to speak, that's a investment for more than 2 or 3 years. You're not going to turn those over that fast. And then two, it's really about then people back, you're almost back to normal life now. So the things that drove us to do outdoor activities in COVID now are driving us back to more social lives in restaurants and things like that. So that market's certainly changed in the last 2 years quite a bit.
Interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. With this, so with the fluctuations in customer demands, that obviously means you guys have to fluctuate on your side and kind of meet to address that. So with those challenges you addressed or mentioned, what sort of strategies have you guys implemented in order to kind of meet those challenges and be able to fluctuate with those customer demands?
Well, I think it's all data driven, and it starts with really good communications with your customer. Almost in some cases, we almost have to have daily demands, contact and communication, where we're used to having like weekly electronic communication of demand. Now it's almost things are changing and pivoting, almost within a week for sure. And part of it has to do with the whole supply chain. There are issues in the supply chain, whether the product comes from overseas, whether it's from the States, but understanding really, the holes and weaknesses in different aspects of the supply chain, whether it's wire harnesses or tires or seats or whatever it is, that I also think that's a challenge. So it's about over communication is the biggest thing, and using data to communicate is a lot more effective than just speculation of, well, we may want this and we might want that, but let's see the real data and let's see what you can produce. So I think that's the biggest strategy is more communication and use of data.
You're talking about the kind of the buyer behavior. I was thinking about that. I wonder how remote work plays into that whole buying decision process, right?
Yeah.
And now that the market is, according to companies, beginning to change a little bit, where they're looking to bring more people back into the office, right? And how is that going to drive demand going forward?
Yeah, that's one of the things that we are trying to solve, understand that what we really do with our workforce as well. Obviously, if you're in a factory, you have to be in the factory, right? That's a no, there's no questions asked there. But it's the office, the engineering, the planning side of things, all that work can be done remotely, but you do lose some of the connections and connectivity that you may have to have, or even some ideas. I think some thought-provoking things where you just bump into somebody at the water cooler and say, "Hey, I saw this. What do you think about it?" You kind of miss some of those casual conversations that could lead to really good innovation.
No, absolutely. I agree with you. Do you think it also kind of drives how demand for cars will change going forward, right? If people are starting to go back into the office versus staying at home, right? They didn't have to use their cars necessarily as much when they were home. Right now, if they have to travel and commute, that's going to change behavior, I can see.
Yeah, I absolutely think that. Well, I live in the greater Detroit area, and I know I-interstate, which I drive every day, there's been less traffic the last 3 or 4 years than there was before, but I can see it slowly coming back, which, like you said, more people are using their vehicles. I also think that cities and towns figuring out things like rideshare the Uber market, all those things really play into what is the transportation strategy going forward for each individual, let alone families, and then for companies. So I think there's going to be a uptick in demand. I know there will be an uptick in demand coming in the next 2 years for the heavy truck business, like the freight liners and things like that, because of some of their governmental standards are changing. But as far as the consumer is concerned, how you really want to travel and your preference and what's available to you, I think is really intriguing time.
So you mentioned your strategy is really focusing on the data and communicating using the data, which means that there has to be some sort of standardization of the data so everybody can kind of understand what's going on, what we're talking about, and actually digest and be able to make decisions based off that data.
Right.
So how have you guys kind of gone about that, and kind of what sort of parameters have you just placed on your standardization and determine this is why it matters to us, and the strategy behind that?
Well, it starts with, depending on what you're trying to measure, it really starts on the definition of that, and then agreeing to that. It's amazing how many different ways you really could measure something like on-time delivery. On-time delivery. I mean, it's plus or minus 5 days. What is your customer measure? But having clear line of sight of what the actual definition, and then most importantly, what are you trying to solve? Why are you measuring that, or why are you keeping that data? And then how are you going to use that data to drive improvement in your business, right? So first start with the definition. And then it's like, you have to find why I need that data, because I think some folks just gather data and say we have tons of data, but a bunch of it doesn't get used. I think we went through an exercise. I think Paul and your team helped us with this just a year and a half ago. Maybe we had like 4,000 metrics. When you think about our 13 plants across North America, we're down to around 1,000. Still way too many for me. I can count 13 that I watch. But it's really a process of understanding what's most important. Right? It's almost a Pareto thought process. But having a clear, defined definition of that data, communicating it, and then why it's important is really part of our strategy, so that we can move with clarity forward quickly.
I was going to say, I know we've gone through that kind of iteration, right? We started one place and we began that iteration a year or so ago with you, and changed and kind of reduced the scope of what you were measuring out there. How do you cascade that information down to the plants, right? To the plants, I know you work with the plant leaders, but how does that go down further, right? Down to the shop floor, so they're aware of how they're delivering to the overall experience of the organization.
Yeah, I think we have a backbone system of called daily management. So we have a system of meetings, cascading meetings from the shop floor operator all the way up to my boss, the CEO of the company, where we have a structure of shiftly, daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly meetings, that proper communication of proper information, whether it's passing information up and down the line, whether it's recognizing how people are doing, or how we're going to improve metrics, or how the business is doing. It really has to do with the backbone of having a really solid daily management system that really fosters and propagates, open communication. And then you have the anchors of the metrics and the data you're trying to measure, so that you always have something to anchor back to.
I like that. So with connecting all the different levels, tracking data, making sure data is accurate, making decisions based off of data. Right now, we're kind of in a transition point in the world with AI and artificial intelligence helping us either track stuff or make decisions. How do you see, in general, it playing out, and how do you see Teijin specifically either adopting AI or working with AI, or it just changing the realm you work in?
Well, I think, for us, it's really early days. I think it's really intriguing to see how much faster AI can help us accumulate the right data and then make it available for us to use, and how it'll help us analyze the data. I think that's really intriguing to me. I think that's a space we're watching specifically for us. Probably the first thing we're going to do is use AI to help us supplement our Class A body part um, inspection through cameras, and then the technology teaching itself what defects are, so that, like on a Corvette again, currently we have we use human resources to really inspect quality in, where the use of the technology of cameras tying to the machine learning of AI, I think is really going to be an advantage for us going forward, that we can have the AI systems learn and then help us understand root cause analysis and drive back ways that we can then make the product better and eliminate those defects, and that people and going to market, people will get better products because of it. So I think the speed of data acquisition, the AI ability to learn and then analyze the data for you so you can make quicker decisions is really a really exciting field for me.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it's a matter of how do you look at the data, right? But there's a lot of, to your point, is there's a lot of human side to it right now, a lot of human decisioning that happens. And how do you kind of combine those two together, right? Because there's a lot of people making decisions, but there's a lot of data out there. And can you decide if someone's doing something somewhere else in the organization, right, effectively, how do you use that and leverage that to say, well, if I do this across the board, now I can actually improve overall in the organization, and using machine learning, to your point, to help that. I think it's a great area.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah. So one of the things you talked about is you have a number of plants, right? You have 13 plants, and they're spread out geographically out there. As a leader, right? Obviously, that's a challenge, right? You've got different people going different directions. How do you find kind of driving the organization in one direction and making sure that everyone is aligned properly and the communication is there? I know you have those meetings and you talk about that. What other strategies do you kind of deploy to help that?
Well, I think you said the key words. It really starts with strategy deployment. What, on an annual basis to start with, and then quarterly updating your strategy to really be able to respond to what's happening in your marketplace. And that's our business situation. Somebody else may have a faster cycle time or a slower cycle time, but truly staying true to your strategy, understanding what problems you're trying to solve for strategically, is really how then we align the 13 businesses we have, how they're all going to impact that strategy. And the impact that we try to measure as much as anything is how's it going to impact our people? How's it going to impact our communities? How's it going to impact our customers? And if we do the right things there strategically, then we should see a positive business impact. And so how the business results come through at the end of the day. But it really starts with, as some people may know as Hoshin Connery or Hoshin planning, but strategic, deployment and planning of that, and being able to communicate it again. There are a lot of really cool things that people have come up with, X matrices and stuff to do strategy deployment. But if it doesn't communicate well, and you have to spend weeks and months training people how to read your strategy, then you're behind the 8 ball already. So how do you simplify it, communicate it, and then execute it is the most important part. It's really nice to have a nice strategy, but if you can't execute it, it doesn't really matter. It's just a piece of paper.
Yeah, absolutely. And you should think about kind of the staffing, though. I'm sure the demands on coaching and leadership, right? That's one of the areas you've got to provide guidance to the organization, right? Overall, how do you find that personally to challenge? What kind of guidance could you help other people understand of how you deal with that, and helping others and coaching them in their journeys along development?
the biggest piece of advice is that each individual has to be invested in their own learning to start with. You have to have a certain amount of curiosity. And I don't know that you ever truly master leadership. I'm currently studying a book called Mastering Leadership, but I don't know that you truly master it because situations change. And so you have to be, I think what you have to really master is how do I handle different situations? Because different people, my brother and I are 1 year apart, but we're totally different people. So you could be from same roots. I mean, everybody needs to be treated as an individual. So you have to look at each an individual problem as an individual problem and how it reflects back to people, and then how you're going to treat people with kindness, fairness, but still do the right thing. I mean, if I could write an employee handbook that just said do the right thing, that's all we would need to do. Then we wouldn't need all sorts of other legal things and stuff like that. But it's not that simple. So mastering leadership is about continuing educating yourself, understanding what's going on with your people, and understanding what's going on with them as individuals, and what really motivates them, what drives them, what holds them back. I think you have to go deeper than a holistic approach is nice, but ultimately you have to get down to the source of really what really drives each individual.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I agree with you. One of the things I learned earlier on in my career from a leader was that you can always learn, right? To your point is it's always a learning, right? I don't care who the person is, I can learn from them, right? And when I stop learning, that's the problem, right?
Yes.
Out there. So I absolutely agree with you. It was funny. My son is part of a leadership program, and they were talking about exactly what you're going through. Is a lot of people do conflict avoidance, right?
Yeah.
Especially in a business relationship, they're teaching conflict strategies, right? How do they actually deal with that? And it's a skill, right? It's not something inherently that people are comfortable with out there. But from an accountability standpoint, it really changes the game of what goes on in the business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you look at it, really, leaders need to have at least 5 aspects. It's really, they need to have certain knowledge, knowledge of the work and the products they're trying to deliver, knowledge of what's, kind of keeps you in the guidelines of with people, rules and regulations. But then you need to have skills like you were talking about, Paul. You need to have the skill of how do you actually, work with people? That's a skill. How do you, resolve conflicts and guide people? You need to figure out how to problem solve. You need to have that skill. You need to have the skill of being able to grow and teach people, lead people. I mean, so there are at least 5 things I can think of that everybody needs. Some of them are specific to what you do, but if you start with those, 5 foundational things, and then build and learn it, and then you learn from experience, I think you have a good foundation to be able to move forward.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Yeah, I always, every problem has more than one facet to it. There's no problem that has only one solution or one side. So all of that, I definitely agree with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I didn't have any questions.
Go ahead, Will. Yeah, go ahead, Will.
Go ahead.
Basically, Wayne, if you look at kind of emerging leaders, right, you're always trying to identify people, and you said, right, you want to have these 5 skills, right, out there. What's the kind of the process that your organization goes through to figure out if people truly have that skill set to move to that next leadership level? Because someone who knows their job very well, like I know we've all been in this world, is someone who does their job great is put in a leadership role. They may not have leadership experience or even desire to be a leader, right? And a lot of times they fail as a leader. How do you figure out where are those emerging leaders in the organization? Because it's all about succession, right? It's all about continuation in organization.
Well, one of the things we didn't talk about with our company in Tajin is we grew very rapidly. We grew from like a $400 million company. Within 2 years, we were a $1.5 billion company. So I think that hindsight would say we should have had a better succession planning process. And even now, as we are more stabilized on that level of revenue, now what is our real succession planning process to identify not only potential leaders in the business moving forward, how we hire potential leaders in the business, all the way, but then how do we support them so that they can be the future leaders? I was just talking to my boss the other day about creating a role of assistant plant manager that would actually be somebody who would rotate through 3 or 4 of our businesses in 2 years, that they would get the different experiences of our business, different cultures in our business, and then they would be ready to be a plant manager at another, so we know we have a retirement coming up in 2 years. Let's start preparing somebody now versus going, oh my gosh, to go find talent. We need to kind of grow our own, and that helps us also grow our culture, right? What do we want to be culturally? And again, some of those things are still to be answered because of our spurt of growth and things like that. But I think succession planning is where it starts. But that has to come from your strategy, though. Again, what do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want your culture to be like? How do you want to treat your people? So it really does tie together if you're going to be effective at it.
No, absolutely.
That's what I was going to say, is that it also helps keep everybody also on the same page and aligned. It's if you're, training these leaders coming up through your system, then by the time they get to a leadership role, they understand how the organization functions and the processes behind it. Because that's always a challenge we see sometimes, is a new leader is brought in because it's a necessity and they need one right now, and they go get somebody from outside and they've got a different process. It takes time to kind of get them on the same page, but with your process, it is all connected, like you said.
Yeah. Ultimately, what we really need to do is provide clarity, right? And I think that you guys have really helped us with that, helped us really grow over the 3 years of really, with some of the systems and thought process you've brought to us. But I think ultimately the goal has to be clarity, so everybody understands what's next, what's happening, and why it's happening. Because if you can't tell people why you're doing something, it just leaves questions and doubt, which then there is no clarity. So I think clarity is a key in communication, everything we do going forward.
Oh, definitely. One of the questions that came in is, obviously now is kind of an interesting time with the multi-generational, right? You got different people at different stages in life, right? Have you found challenges in kind of finding people to begin to replace a generation that may be aging out? Or do you find that there is a ready resource pool that's available that people want to work and learn?
I think that, again, it goes down to the individual. I don't care what generation you are. There are people that want to achieve certain levels of how they would define success. What success looked like for my father is not what success looks like for me. But there is still a want to be successful, right? So how do we help people be successful in a way that they want to be successful, and or maybe open a door for them that they never knew was open to them, and they may be fantastic at something they never even considered. So for me, repeating on what I said before, get to know the individuals, get to know their strengths, build on their strengths, and then the rest will come. People end up in the right places for themselves if everybody's working to be mutually successful together. So I don't think it's a generational issue. It's an individual issue, and then working with individuals to help them, get to where they want to be.
Yeah, I like that. I agree with you. I mean, the generational piece of it, what we see in a lot of companies would be just a point of where people have a tendency to jump jobs, right? I think there's a frequency of jumping jobs, probably a higher frequency in some of the younger generations than it was in some of the old generations out there. But to your point is, if you create that environment and it's a good environment for them to stay in, then why would they leave, right?
Right.
That's great. As we're wrapping up, the question that came in is, as a kind of emerging leader in a plan, what would be your guidance and feedback? Is how do I take the next step to get to a plant leader? I mean, obviously it's personal, right? But any kind of thoughts that you can provide, share, tips based on your experience?
Yeah, I think that my number one thing is find problems and solve problems. If you're solving problems for your boss or for the team or for the company or for your own members of your own team or even for yourself, if you're solving problems that are helping other people within your organization, that'll be recognized. And then that'll open opportunities that you can't even imagine if you just keep looking at that as how can I be part of the solution or even be the solution versus being, an obstacle. So that'd be my number one thing is just I can see a problem. How can I be part of the solution? How can I be the solution? I can present a solution. I think that's really what that's how doors get opened up.
Yep. I agree. I mean, I think that's the key learning, right? Is helping people deliver solutions, not problems, right? Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely. Out there. As we look to wrap up, Will, any kind of additional comments, questions?
No, I think we had a lot of great insights. I liked, I think big thing, like you said, is everything ties together. Everything's connected to everything else. So once you address, our communication aspect, that means we have to address how clear we are in our definitions, which means we have to make sure our leaders are on page, which means we have to, work them up like that. But it is all interconnected, and I appreciate the insight you provided.
Yeah, Wayne, I appreciate it. Thank you very much for joining the Pulse of High Performance, sponsored by Visual. It's been a great session. If anyone needs to connect with you, how would you like them to connect with you?
Yeah, I think a starting connection point would be my direct business email, which I think you guys will provide for them. That just came up on the screen. So I think that's the best way. That way I can really relate it to this session, and then we can decide how we move forward in connecting. And it could be a personal conversation or it could be through LinkedIn, but we'll start with my work email.
Great. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you for your time.
Thank
Have a great
you.
day, everybody.